Okay, we're up at Roger Meyer's honey house, and this is David Veith, and we're going to demonstration on making frames, waxing frames, or putting wax frames together, and so on. When you get your frames or your parts and pieces, you're going to have a wood strip in it, like so, that pops out. And I just use my pocket knife and go through and pop them all out. You got a fat spot and a skinny spot. When I get ready to nail them, I like to nail through the skinny spot on the top side, because you're going to cross nail them through here on the crossbar, and that way you don't end up running nails into your cross nail. This jig is set up so I can actually do 10 to 12 frames, but we're going to just do 10 out of it today. And it will do all sizes. This splits apart here with interior latches, so that I can do shallows or do mediums or deeps. Today we're just doing deeps. There's two different styles out there of these. There's this style with some sort of rubber holding the cross or the sides on, or there's an internal one. I've used both. In the last few years I've gone to this style in general. I personally like using a chip brush because, one, it's nice and fast and easy. The main point that you want to glue is this little edge here, and when I do this I can go through and just kind of do a dab straight on through, and it becomes fast, efficient. And then when I do the bottom, I'll use the other half of the brush. I view glue as being cheap at this point. Time ends up becoming more valuable to me than anything else at times. This glue is a little cold today, so it ain't hitting the sides quite as well as a lot of times it does for me. Roger likes Titebond 2. I tend to use Titebond 3. I think we both buy it by the gallon because we can go through enough of it that it becomes cost efficient. Even if I end up throwing a quart away after 3-4 years, it's still cheaper than buying it by the little bottle. As I said before, I like to work the fat side here, and so I'll lay all my fat sides one way in the jig itself. Where to go now? Yeah, I need to move around. I'm in bad position. Usually they're just tight enough that if I really wanted to, I could probably use just my hand to do it. But like on these here, all the fat edges are farther away from me. And just makes, as I go down the line, easier. What I'll end up using through 80% of this is going to be 1.25 inch, 1.5 1/4 inch crown staple. I originally was running a bunch of inch, and over the years I've had some minor issues, even with good glue. That failing on me. I'm basically just, instead of just kind of doing a hard tap with my hand, I'm just using the hammer just to tap it down. I might short sheath myself one. Now I got it. There's lots of different ways of doing these. I mean, originally everybody did all this work by hand, which is insane in my opinion. But if you don't feel like buying a little air compressor and a little crown staple gun, have at it with fine nails. I admit I'm a tool junkie, and it helps being in construction, so I have no problem justifying buying too many tools. just running a Hilti 1/4" crown staple in general. A lot of times I'll feel initially where just to confirm which side I've ran my thin spot of the top of the frame, just to make sure. And then I'll just go through and nail Roger's workbench. A little lower, I'm getting blown in. And that takes care of the top for the time being. Then we'll flip it over and start all over with the bottom. See, I'm using the narrow side of the brush this time to catch the bottoms. That's one reason why I like the little inch chip brushes. The tops work real good for the width side. And I mean, the chip brushes I usually pick up at Harbor Freight, and if you're lucky and catch them on sale and buy a box of them, they're 50 for, $7 or something like that. I mean, a lot of times I'll use a small container and I'll just cut a notch in and put the leave the brush in, or I'll take the brush out and proceed to throw it in a bucket of water, and next time I come back I'll start all over, but I'll just leave glue in a container that has a lid on it. It's not as critical where you nail the bottom side because you're not putting any cross nails in it. You don't need it. There's nothing more aggravating and frustrating than to take and have nails sticking out of one place or another, because you're going to be scraping across this hopefully once a week once honey season's going on. And there's nothing more frustrating than having a hive tool come along and hit a nail that's sticking up and stopping your momentum per se, or that's a personal pet peeve of mine anyways. These have come up pretty tight, but a lot of times I'll use a clamp like this. I've just some of these steps are probably extra that you don't really need. Some of them are just what I have found over time that's made life easier for me. As like everything in beekeeping, whatever works for you within reason. That way I don't have to worry about the bottoms coming snug it off. From there I'll go through, and as I was saying before, I'll cross nail them. What I was talking about by cross nailing, I took and right here into the fat side of the frame. This is fat. This is skinny, or the wedge, is where I cross pin it. A lot of times if you don't cross pin them, this top will still, even with glue and staples, potentially will pull off, especially in the old days when they did not glue them. They are always cross nailed. A lot of the beekeeping supply houses sell little brass or steel Buchanans that they sit in there. This hole here that we're going to eventually be running some wire through to wire this frame in. See, I'm using wax on these frames here. They're the biggest pain in the keister that you can think of, and that's the plainest word I can say. Instead, I do a, as I said, I'm a tool junkie. I do a staple across, where I know Roger does just doesn't worry about it one way or the other. So I'll run staples this way. And then on the other side, I'll run them the other way, so the staples, so the wire, when I go to embed them, or put the wire on and pull it tight, it doesn't literally embed deep into the wood. This would be the equivalent of like your T50, just hand staple gun. This is actually a little upholstery gun that I'm using here. Does the same job, except I don't have to pull the trigger or pull a heavy trigger. And that'll take care of that side of the operation. You have one complete framed nail. You can see where I basically had one edge of that staple come through. It will not matter or anything, but it's still cross pin it, which is the biggest thing. Usually I'll set these aside. Following night I'll let them dry overnight, and then from there I'll start putting wax in them next time I'm out in the shop. Okay, I'm going to start wiring up a frame that I did a while back. Staples are here. This is normal wire that I bought from the bee supply house. With a, you can use a little lightweight doorbell transformer, car batteries. When you go to, because what I'll do is I'll literally electrify this wire here eventually, and melt the wax into the wire. The traditional way of doing this would be some thumbtacks. I don't like them. Too much handwork. I'll take my little staple gun. I've never had a problem running them that way. I got a push lever thing that's going to push the frame in so that when I open it back up, you can literally play music with these suckers. Because you want them nice and tight. I'm using hooked. I don't know if the camera will pick them up, but there's little hooks on this, and I'll be using those to help hold the wax in there. This has always been the part that I hate doing more than anything else, is getting wax down in the groove. It seems like it always wants to fight you a little bit. From there, I'm going to change out. Normally at the main shop at the house, I'll take and have these on 2 different airlines. And then from there, I'll put the top bar, I'll staple in there. This is one place that you want to definitely use the right size staple. For years I've used 5/8 staples. because they do not go through the top. If you got staples or nails across here, it becomes a big headache to the point where if I find one like that, I'll take and I'll drag out the file and I'll file it. From there, I got a little transformer here with just a little push on off door dimmer thing. I got my positive is over here tied to this washer that has a fine hole drilled in it. Then I usually just connect here. I like to bring it up here so there's a little bit of space in there. Then from there I'm just pressing them down there to the point where I can see the wax starting to melt here. And then it's done. Now I know Roger likes to run. I'll cut my wires off and so on. I mean, it doesn't have to be like there isn't contact here, but that's fine. The big thing is just make sure that it doesn't slotch down. There's probably this wax sheet probably isn't down all the way in the groove, and so I had some belly buckle. Now, if I really wanted to get picky, I could run a spur back here like this, which Roger I know uses all the time. I very rarely use one, and embed that wire into the wax. And that's a completed frame. Unless you like to date them so that you know how old that frame is once you get done with down the road. Otherwise you end up with eventually frames like that.